Looking at Garmin's current lineup, for handhelds, they have the GPSMAP series, the Oregon, Montera, Montana, Etrex, Dakota, and the 72. When I'm looking at GPSs, I can tell you right away I don't want to get one that has a touchscreen. Why? Because touchscreens don't work very well with gloves, and I'm almost always using gloves out in the field. I like knowing that I have the reliability of tactile buttons. And when I look at these also, I notice that the GPSMAP series has a big, nice antenna. The GPS that I'm reviewing today is the 62s, which is second in the lineup of 5 62 series GPSs that Garmin sells. It doesn't have the built-in topos, like the models with the T in the name. However, as you'll see, that really doesn't matter. In terms of cost, you almost always get what you pay for in terms of electronics. Especially when you're talking about electronics, it could be a potential lifesaver. I paid about $140 for this, used back in 2010, which is an absolute steal. It was a lot more than that originally, although since they've come out with the 64 series, I've seen some pretty good deals on these, even in the last couple months. Cabela's, Dick's, and some other major retailers have had great sales on these. I'm always kind of curious in terms of size how small they could make a GPS if they really wanted to. Obviously our cell phones have GPS with a little bit different technology, and they can fit easily into our jeans pockets. Since this doesn't do too well with pockets, what I usually end up doing is I take a carabiner and I'll just strap it onto a belt loop or my pack. And in terms of weight, the GPS all by itself is 6.3 ounces with 2 Ultimate Lithium AA's, 7.3 ounces. And I do like the way it feels in my hand. I never have to reach too far for any of the buttons with my thumb, and even when I'm wearing gloves, button mashing really hasn't been much of an issue at all. No consumer electronics product is 100% perfect. I accept that, and when I think about electronics, I like to talk in terms of a frustration factor. When something does go wrong, is it something minor that I can live with, or is it something that makes me so frustrated I just want to throw it at something? This GPS is a very low frustration factor. I've never once had a software issue. That's a huge plus. And in terms of its signal gathering capabilities, occasionally it'll take a couple minutes to acquire a signal. Sometimes it's there right away. But regardless, at least in my experience, once it acquires a signal, it's almost impossible to lose it. I've had this thing deep in the spruce swamps of northern Minnesota, up in the bluffs of western Wisconsin, and in the nasty deadfall-laden slopes of the Rocky Mountains in Colorado. Very few complaints. In fact, on that Colorado trip, I didn't have a single issue the entire time. It didn't matter what the elevation was, how thick the timber was, what side of the mountain I was on. Overall, I've been pretty impressed with the battery life on this guy too. I always use the Ultimate Lithium AA's as opposed to the regular alkaline batteries or the rechargeable nickel metal hydride batteries. Those things just have an awesome capacity and they work well in cold weather. Easily justifies the price for them in my opinion. I usually buy them on eBay in bulk so I get a lower piece price, and then I have a bunch of them whenever I need them. I've taken this thing on extended 8-10 hour scouting trips where the thing is on the entire time, no issues. It obviously drains a bit, but I've never had it die on me doing things like that. I can usually take it on several normal hunting trips without having to change the batteries. Out in Colorado, that was, a 6-day trip, and I changed the batteries once on like the 3rd day, and then it was fine for the rest of the trip. If I'm not using the GPS, I'll turn it off. If I'm stopped for an extended period of time, and I'll turn it back on again when I start moving. But if you're conscious about your battery use, turn the screen brightness down when you're not needing it, then I don't really see the average person having any issues with battery life with this thing. Remember when I said that it didn't matter that topo maps weren't preloaded onto the GPS? Here's what you do. Go to gpsfiledepot.com, search for maps, go down to Wisconsin for demonstration purposes. Okay, now you can filter if you want, otherwise I'm just going to look right at the maps here. You can go right to the editor's choice usually. And if I look down here to this editor's choice called Wisconsin Topo, it has the topo maps already preloaded as well as roads, point of interest, and I can see that it works on my PC, obviously free, and it has easy install. You just got to follow the instructions and it'll tell you exactly what to do. Then you can go on to Basecamp, which is Garmin's free software for the GPS. and you can load that map you downloaded and install it onto your computer. So I'll go to Maps, Wisconsin Topo, and here it is. I can zoom in. See all these topo lines, these roads, little creeks? All that information is now on this Basecamp software. Once you have the map installed on Basecamp or MapSource, then you can put them on your GPS. There's good tutorials on how to do all this right on gpsfiledepot.com. In my Going in Blind Hunting Strategy video, I went into detail about adding JPEG image overlays onto the GPS. It's pretty cool. Apart from adding aerial photos, there's another neat trick you can do. I'm not going to come out and recommend doing this, but explaining it for educational purposes is fine. You ice fishermen could go on the Navionics web app, zoom into that favorite piece of structure, use the print screen key on your computer or the snipper tool to get your JPEG and add it to the GPS. I wouldn't like this for open water because the screen is too small for open water fishing in a boat, but for ice fishing it's fine. If you don't mind spending $10 though, I do highly recommend the Navionics USA app for $9.99. Putting that on your smartphone gives 1-foot contours on quite a few lakes and allows full functionality of the maps as far as zooming and highlighting. So, bottom line, would I recommend the 62s? Absolutely. Would I recommend getting something newer instead from the Garmin line, like the 64 series? Probably not, because in my opinion at least, the advancements that they made in the 64 series aren't enough to justify the cost difference for what you can get this now, so I would definitely still go with the 62 series GPS. And what about just sticking with your smartphone? They have GPS, and there's a bunch of nice apps out now for GPS, so why not just stick with that? Well, I asked myself the same question back in 2010 when I was thinking about making the purchase on this, and looking back, I'm incredibly glad that I decided to buy this rather than just stick with the cell phone. The screen resolution and size and the brightness is really nice on the cell phone. The apps are great, but they're just not trustworthy enough for me to use. I've had it fail so many times when I'm in the woods, when you got a tree canopy, when there's hills, and then you end up getting that big 10-mile radius circle and you just, the frustration factor, right? That's exactly it. I've had that happen so many times with the cell phone GPS. So I always carry this when I go in the woods and I know that I'm going to need it. Even sometimes when I don't think I'm going to need it. It's nice to have just in case. The only thing I use the cell phone GPS for is navigating on roadways or using the Navionics app when I'm ice fishing. For everything else, I trust the Garmin.